Welcome to Empowering Workers, Federal Employees' Disability and Employment Rights and Social Security Disability for All.
Hello and welcome to Empowering Workers, Federal Employees' Disability and Employment Rights and Social Security Disability for All with Eric L. Pines. Eric is a nationally recognized federal employment lawyer, mediator, and attorney business coach. He represents federal employees and acts as in-house counsel for over 50,000 federal employees through his work as a federal employee labor union representative. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is about navigating the Social Security disability maze. I'm going to give some tips for a faster and smoother process. Eric, good to see you.
Hey, it's great to see you, Kevin, as always.
Can you walk us through the typical process of filing a Social Security disability claim?
Sure. It's actually quite a simple process to get started. You just go to the website, ssa.gov, and submit your application there. It's as simple as it basically walks you through the whole process. It's much simpler to start than it is to get approved.
Well, what are some of the reasons that Social Security disability claims are denied?
Good question. But before we go there, I'll walk you through like what the ideal application would have. If it's somebody applying for the first time, you might as well. So first you have to be eligible. In order to be eligible for Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, you have to have been unable to provide what's called substantial work for at least 12 months. In other words, you just have to have not been able to do a real job for 12 months is another way of saying that, or be terminally ill. Gather medical evidence. You should get together as much medical evidence as you can from treating doctors. You want ideally a doctor to say that you can't do the previous thing I just mentioned, work for at least 12 months. Like I said before, you could apply online, you could apply by telephone, or you could show up in person at a local state office, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. They'll walk you through how to apply. But applying online is simple as well, or you could give them a call. And then Social Security the reps there may require additional information. They might follow up with you. They might ask for a consultative medical exam. So you should obviously take those very seriously. And then you will await your decision from your initial application, which can take 3 to 5 months. And I will say this has nothing to do with you. If you're denied, I shouldn't say I have nothing, but a lot of times don't take it personal, because about somewhere between 60 and 90% of the numbers of denials the first time that I've heard. It's almost like Social Security is basically trying to just weed out whether you're serious, and they just blanket denying, unless of course you have a terminal illness, which is a whole other story, which we could talk about a little bit later. If you have a typical everyday medical condition, there's a very high likelihood you will be denied no matter what you do the first time.
Oh, wow. Okay. So let's talk about some of these reasons for denial. What are the most common reasons that these disability claims are not approved?
Insufficient medical evidence, not having clear proof of your disabling condition, failure to follow treatment plans. Let's say treatment, depending on what your condition is, let's say there was a treatment plan assigned to you by a doctor. If you failed to follow, that'll be an excuse that they would use to deny you. Working above the limit. There's a financial limit of $1,550 a month for 2024, at least. We should get you some updated numbers soon. And that could disqualify you if you are making too much money. In other words, you really can't be working at all other than a little bit here and there part-time under that $1,550. Or lastly, incomplete applications. If you're missing information or you don't provide paperwork at all, that can result in automatic denial before they even look at your application.
Okay. And do you have any tips maybe that you can give to claimants to avoid these pitfalls from the start?
Well, medical evidence, the two things I would say is, number one, obviously, if you're there's some things that are just immediately disqualifying. You clearly can't make more than the amount of money I said previously, but then let's assume you've got everything else in place. Then it becomes medical evidence. You really need to have a doctor's letter or a doctor's assessment that says you cannot provide proper useful service. You can't do your job, basically any job at all, for at least a year. And it has to be a serious condition. So not putting together medical documentation proper from a doctor or from having proper records is one of the biggest reasons why cases are denied.
What types of documentation should applicants ensure they have ready so that they can make sure everything's properly submitted?
Ideally, you would have perfect medical documentation where the doctor says what your condition is, how long the condition, how it will affect your ability to do your job, how it has affected it, and how long that will continue for. That's the perfect world. But then if that's not the case, if you don't have that, sometimes a doctor is not willing to write such a letter. One of the reasons why our firm is so successful is because we actually assist with the doctors with the letters. But let's say that you're not able to get that letter. So then you really want just solid medical evidence that your condition is so disabling that you cannot do your job, and proof that it affects your ability to do the job.
What role does the Social Security Administration's SSA or the SSA's Disability Determination Services play in the process?
That is basically, they review the medical evidence. They're the local office. So the Social Security contracts with, interestingly, with local state agencies to take in your information. That's who you're applying to, and that's who follows up on your initial application. So they review the initial medical evidence and work with you. And if they need something, they'll request it from you. And if they do request it, you should respond immediately. They may tell you that you should attend a consultative exam. If it's scheduled, you obviously have to comply with that. And then you should have your doctors, if you're applying, all the treating doctors that you're working with, send updated medical records to DDS so they have the most complete picture of your condition.
Okay. I mean, your experience, is DDS fairly easy to work with?
It's a case-by-case basis because we're talking about state offices throughout the entire country. Some of them are great. They're government employees. So some of them are great, work hard, and some of them are just getting through the day. So, and you'll notice, as I said in the beginning of this, somewhere between 60 and 90% of people are being denied the first time. So this is the area where they're being denied the most. After that, there's a possibility of a reconsideration. My firm does those reconsiderations. We do the initial applications too. And then if your reconsideration is denied by Social Security, you move to something called hearing before an ALJ, which stands for Administrative Law Judge. And those are a lot of the cases that we take because that's when you really need an attorney for sure. We jump into those cases, and those are for SSA judges. And so I'm kind of just riffing a little bit here, but basically, it's born out of that local, and it moves all the way to judges and the Social Security. And even that, there's an appeal process past that, which my firm doesn't handle. But there are those first three initial stages. The first stage, there's a very high denial rate. The second stage is the reconsideration. This is in writing. That's also a high denial rate, not quite as high. And then finally, getting an attorney who analyzes your case. And if they find that you have a pretty strong case or a type of case that they're willing to take, obviously they're interested in it because they only get paid a percentage. Our firm only gets paid a percentage. The law requires attorneys to not charge clients, but to take a percentage of their back pay, up to 25% of their back pay. And that's limited. The number, I think it's around 9,200 this year. So to make a long story short, if an attorney's taking your case, they're only going to get paid if you win, and it's going to come out of back pay, which you didn't have in the first place. So it's not so painful. And at the end of the day, Social Security actually sends the money to the attorney. So to answer your question, a very long way of answering it, you've got that initial stage that you're applying to, and there's a high likelihood of denial there. Second stage is also a high likelihood of denial. And the third stage is if you have a strong case and you believe in it, that's when you should reach out to an attorney for sure. And they'll hopefully do that appeal for you, and you won't have to pay them. It'll come out at the end of your percentage of your back pay.
Do you recommend people have an attorney from the onset, or do you just say wait till after that first or second denial?
I do, because it's helpful to have, first of all, an attorney on your side. Attorney you can ask questions to, putting together the best application possible. There's no one to ask those questions to other than Google if you don't have an attorney with you.
You can ask ChatGPT too.
That's true. That's
my best friend.
You're not alone.
I know.
But no, so yes, I definitely do, especially because there's a 90% denial rate. So it's great to have an attorney in your back pocket to jump in immediately on the appeals.
You mentioned earlier that terminally ill patients, the different situation, different process, obviously. Can you kind of explain how that process works?
There's something called a compassionate allowance, CAL, and certain conditions, very serious conditions that could lead to, terminal conditions. They call for expedited review. I think offhand, there's cancer, there's stroke, there's Lou Gehrig's disease, things like that, where it's clear the person is extremely ill. Social Security will call through those early applications and look for those conditions on their own. You don't have to call it to their attention, though it can't hurt, obviously, and an attorney can help with that. But if they find that you have one of those conditions, then there's an expedited process to get you qualified much quicker, and you don't have to go through the appeals process.
Is there anything that a claimant can do to expedite the process of a claim?
Just get all answer any questions that they ask you to follow up on, immediately follow up as soon as possible, and get them all the medical records. It all comes down to medical records at the end of the day, as long as you qualify in the other prongs that we talked about. But those are pretty clear. You either make over the amount of money or you don't. You're either paid into Social Security or you didn't. So it's really the medical evidence, having a solid foundation for what your condition is, how serious it is, and how it limits your ability, restricts your ability to do your job for at least a year.
Okay. And you said, sorry, correct me. Was it a 3 to 5 month process? Is that kind of what it is?
So with the initial application, It can be around that time. It all depends on the office that you're working with. Then if you move to the reconsideration, you're looking, another number of months. And then from start to finish, if you end up going through the ALJ, it could be 2 years before you find out if you're granted. So getting back to the CALV, the compassion allowance, you would be approved much quicker than the typical road, which is to go through those appeals. And I do want to, if a person has one thing, if you're watching this video and you have a Social Security disability, you believe, don't give up. If you have a legitimate condition, recognize that it's almost like they're denied on principle to see if you're serious, to come back and get yourself an attorney or put your application together in a better way in appeals. And if you follow through because you're serious about this, then you'll reap the rewards in the end.
Is there a lot of fraud in these? Is that one of the reasons why they deny out at the outset?
I'm sure there's a ton of fraud because, let's be honest, that's just the world we live in. But more than that, yeah, exactly. But more than that, it's probably more that everyone just, why not apply? And so many people just don't qualify. I mean, earlier in previous podcasts and in later podcasts, we're going to talk about that for federal employees, which we represent as well. There's a disability process called Federal Employee Disability, otherwise known as OPM, Office of Personnel Management Disability. And that you really just have to be unable to do the job that you're assigned to. Social Security is much, much stricter. And if you're talking about it in terms of, let's say, insurance has different ways that you can qualify and, different types of policies you could pay more money or less money for. So there's some that are called own occupation and there's some that are called any occupation. So any occupation means you can't do any job at all. And that's Social Security. You really need to be disabled. Federal Employee Disability, it's much easier to get. Its own occupation, the position that you're assigned to. So to answer your question, there's a lot of denials because it's just really hard to get. And so people apply and, they're much less likely to qualify. The best example is we have a lot of federal employees we get disability for, but we don't get Social Security for. So there you go.
Okay. So the federal disability is easier to get than the Social Security. Is there any reason that those rules that it's harder to get those?
So that's because you really have to be like in a hospital bed, I like to say, to get Social Security. You have to be very sick. You have to be unable to work at all. I mean, I'm a little exaggerating with the hospital bed, but you really just can't be working. And federal employee law, you could be doing light duty. Federal disability retirement. You could be doing light duty work. You could literally, I always joke around. It's not a joke. It's true, but it's kind of interesting. The way I got into disability retirement for federal employees is I was representing a client who was removed and for medical reasons, and I assisted him with his application. He did such a good job. He worked on it himself. He ended up working for me doing applications. And so you can make up to 80% of your previous salary. So he worked for me. And we made sure he didn't make more than 79.9% of his salary. And he ended up making a lot more money than he made before. Sure. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not unethical at all. He worked from home. He did his own hours. And it was a much easier job for him because, I'm a good boss. You know how it is.
Of course. Yeah,
of course. Yeah. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is it's as simple as for Social Security disability, you have to be really disabled, not working at all.
Yeah. Other than making sure you have all your medical documentation in line, are there any other tips you might give somebody who might be filing for the first time?
The main thing is get your ducks in a row, is to make sure that you have your medical clear. After you make clear that you meet the other requirements I talked about, which are non-negotiable, medical is a little bit more subjective. So I just can't I can't reiterate more that having solid medical from a doctor saying that you cannot provide, service, you cannot do your job for at least 1 year.
Yeah. All right. Well, appreciate all the tips and thank you for tuning into Empowering Workers, Federal Employees Disability and Employment Rights and Social Security Disability for All with Eric L. Pines. To connect with Eric, head to pinesfederal.com and be sure to like and subscribe our channel and leave us a review. Eric, always great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.